Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Ukrainian-born jazz pianist Vadim Neselovskyi. His latest release is 2017's Get Up and Go. He was born and raised in Ukraine, and at 15 he went to the Odessa Conservatory. Then he moved on into Germany and finally to the United States, where he completed his studies at the Berklee College of Music and the Thelonious Monk Institute. Over the years, he has toured internationally with Herbie Hancock, Chaka Khan, Bridgewater, and Terri, Lyne, Carrington, along with many others. He loves jazz and talks glowingly about it. So get to know him and dig this interview, my friends.
Vadim, thank you for taking a minute out for me today. I appreciate it.
Of course, my pleasure.
So let's go ahead and start off here. I want to get into your latest album, Get Up and Go. Talk to me about the construction of this album and how you feel about it.
You know, this album is basically a presentation of my working trio to the world. We've started playing together in 2014 when Ukrainian Jazz Festival, Alpha Jazz, invited me to come with a trio, and I assembled a trio out of people I love to play with. I used both Ronen and Dan in different projects of mine. And so when the time came to come with the trio, I thought, okay, let me try to do this with them. And it was such a memorable experience in Ukraine that I thought we should keep playing together. And we started playing together. We started playing concerts, rehearsing a lot, trying different things out. And at some point, I felt, wow, this needs to be recorded. If we don't record it, then, all this work that we've done will be lost. So we went into the studio. In fact, we went into the studio twice. First in Boston at Berklee College of Music Studios, and then we had another session in New York where we also had Sarah Serpa, amazing vocalist, join us. And it's the documentation of our mutual love, I guess. Some of my older compositions have made it on the album, but in a trio version, which I've never done. I'm a pianist who has never recorded trio, which is rare. So this is really my first trio record. But also there are some brand new compositions that were written with this band in mind, such as On a Bicycle, Station Taiga, Almost December. These things were really, they kind of represent where I'm at now.
Talk to me about your childhood. How did you get so involved in jazz growing up in Ukraine? How did that happen?
It's an interesting question. Well, I come from a family of musicians. My mother is a pianist, a classical pianist. And I heard music early on in our household. And I was actually interested in, picking up pop songs on the piano when I heard them on the radio. Before I got my first piano lesson, I was kind of, trying to find a song that I heard on the radio. So I was naturally drawn to, not just classical music, which I've heard in our household, but also, I would hear Michael Jackson songs on the radio and I would try to find a melody on the piano and stuff like this. So I was naturally drawn to harmony, and if you say harmony, then you end up by jazz anyway, because jazz is where it's at in terms of harmonic development in the 20th century. So I naturally kind of moved on into this kind of musical world. I was really fortunate to receive my first composition lessons when I was 8. In our local music school, there were composition lessons offered, which I now realize it's a huge thing, maybe the most important thing that happened to me ever. So I was encouraged to create, and so I felt that I'm a composer. I was writing pieces, performed them on the piano. I was writing, sometimes for violin and piano, for voice and piano when I was a kid. And then when I discovered, Oscar Peterson and Keith Jarrett and Michel Petrucciani, I suddenly realized, wow, so this is where it's at, I can create, but I can still remain lyrical and romantic. And because nowadays, if you go into composition, you inevitably have to start creating, avant-garde sounds, and Schoenberg, Webern were the idols when I started to learn the music, and I wanted to create something like Chopin, but modern. So then I heard Keith Jarrett, and it was clear to me this is where I need to go.
So give me an idea. You were the youngest student ever accepted into the Odessa Conservatory.
Yeah.
You moved to Germany, and then you make your way to the Berklee College of Music. Kind of talk to me a little bit about your timeline and how you felt about going from your European home to the United States.
Well, first we moved to Germany. It was 1995. We immigrated as there was a program where Germany was accepting Jewish immigrants from Soviet Union to rebuild the Jewish community in Germany. So my whole family lives in Germany right now. And we came together. I was still a teenager. I was 17 years old. And I studied classical piano there. And at the same time, I was really already passionate about jazz, but I was kind of doing it on my own. I was assembling my own bands, learning from recordings, hanging out with local players, and, dreaming about the best schools in the world that I've heard about. Of course, I was dreaming about Berklee College. And then I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship. It was a combined scholarship from Berklee and from German government. And I was able to come to study at Berklee with all the expenses covered, because I would never be able to pay for the education, at Berklee College. So in 2002, in January, I came as a student, and it was probably, again, like one of the most amazing things ever happened to me, because Berklee was a perfect place for me. It actually still is. Now I teach there. I've been teaching there, for the past 6 years. It's just the most open environment to any kind of music, and that is very special. You might be able to hear in my music that my music is kind of open to many styles and many genres. It's a combination. And at Berklee, I found this very open-minded environment, that is both, tradition-based, but also very much forward-looking.
And obviously things have worked out for you. You played with the likes of John Scofield, Terrence Blanchard, Benny Golson, Nicholas Payton, Steve Coleman. What have you learned about jazz being around folks like that have that much clout and that much mileage in the world of jazz?
Yeah, well, I really was honored to be a part of the Monk Institute. That this is where all these encounters have happened that you just named. And also, just being on the road with Gary Burton for many years has been probably even more profound impact on me. Is this environment where people who have experience try to teach their students how to learn on their own, right? We cannot really learn anything from others unless we are capable of learning on ourselves. At least in jazz, everyone is basically becoming his or her own teacher. And when I actually went on the road with Gary Burton first in 2004, I realized, wow, now the school actually begins. Now that Berklee College is over, the real school begins. It's just playing night after night with this giant and, thumping behind his solos, having to solo right after him and not sound stupid. It was really just cutting my teeth, night after night. Sometimes I've had very tough, kind of depressing moments. I thought, man, I cannot go on like this. I'm not standing up to the standard, that is that Gary put me on. And somehow Gary was always really supportive, and he would be always the one who would say, no, you're doing just great, and that was really amazing what you did, and, tomorrow will be even better. And then at some point I felt really confident. And, nowadays when I'm going on a bandstand, I don't even feel any nervousness,
Yeah.
And I remember being very, very nervous. So how do you gain this kind of experience? How do you learn to be relaxed on stage and, choose the right thing? I think it's just all these experiences with masters that teach you things that cannot be put into words.
Let me ask you this. Why do you love jazz?
Great question. Actually, there are two things, and then the third thing that is more clear to me now than ever before. But I'll start with first two. I mentioned the word harmony. The way, the history of music has developed, in the 19th century, we really saw a huge development of harmony. You have Frédéric Chopin, you have Robert Schumann, and then later you have Debussy, then early 20th century you have Ravel. People were constantly developing harmonic concepts. The harmony would become more and more rich, more and more sophisticated, more and more beautiful. And I think somewhere around this, development of new Viennese school, modern composers have kind of turned away from harmony. I mean, composers in the academic world, because I don't know what it is. It's all these concepts with the decaphonic music, 12-tone and stuff. Some amazing things have happened, don't get me wrong, but the emphasis on beauty has gone. I remember when I came to my composition lesson and I played a melody, and my teacher told me, no, you cannot write melodies today. It's over. In modern music, you cannot write melodies. It's considered cheesy. My own take on this is that, melodies will always exist. And if a particular kind of music doesn't accept them anymore, they will develop in the other realm of music. So, in my own opinion, where Ravel and Debussy stopped, people like Oscar Peterson, Thelonious Monk, Bill Evans, Charlie Parker, Bud Powell, they just took it further. So, to me, all the amazing things that were happening with harmony in the 19th century in classical music have continued through jazz in the 20th century. That's why, I chose this path, because I wanted to be where the beauty develops, and not just some formal concepts and ideas.
Absolutely.
So that is maybe a very long answer, but an honest one.
Yeah.
And secondly, of course, the element of improvisation is huge, although my music tends to be, very kind of fixed, and I write a lot. And, I'm always looking for this perfect marriage of improvisation and composition. At least on my recordings, you hear a lot of composed stuff. I just played the completely free improvised concert just 2 days ago at the Stone in New York. But that was kind of, one of the rare experiences for me. Beautiful one. But I do believe in a perfect marriage of composition and improvisation. And I think there are moments that can only be expressed through improvisation. And again, Baroque musicians, for example, knew that. And Mozart knew that when he was improvising his own cadences. And again, this kind of art has been lost somewhere around the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th, where we became so perfectionist about everything. And again, it just gives you this breath of fresh air. You're allowed to create on the spot. You're allowed to be in the moment. And that just, to me, that brings so much life into music. So that's the second big factor. And the third one, believe it or not, I think, and I mean, it's strange that I just realized it, but I actually finally realized it. I think what has been going on with the rhythm, I think jazz still remains probably one of the most advanced fields in music. I thought for a while, that modern classical music has a lot of rhythmic development going on, but classical musicians don't try to make it groove. The rhythms are super complicated, triplets, 5/16, 17/16. It looks very complicated on the paper, but they don't try to make it groove. They don't try to make it bounce. And jazz musicians nowadays have come to such a high, degree of rhythmic complexity, and yet they are able to make it dance. I think it's a very unique quality for the music in general, and I'm very interested actually in bringing that kind of element into orchestral classical music. I'm working on it. I'm writing orchestral music based on all these cool things that I've learned in jazz. So yes, I'm in love in jazz.
Yeah, I love it. And what you ended up doing with that answer there is you answered some subsequent answers, and I think that's a great way to wrap everything up. Thank you very much for taking some time out talking about the new album, talking about your life in jazz. It's a great story. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Joe.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Ukraine, Chicago, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Vadim for his time and his stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit Neon Jazz at youtube.com, or visit the home of Neon Jazz at theneonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.